you're going to supplement the ability to keep that family farm.
Right, exactly.
You can farm 800 acres.
Yep.
We can have, clean energy generation going on the other 200 acres. And guess what? You can still farm that too.
Yeah. Welcome back to the America First Energy Podcast. We're here on site and excited to be doing an interview with Allison Wickham of the Siller Pollinatory Company. And we're going to discuss a broad array of topics, but most specifically, how we can bring a separate use to a piece of land that's being used to generate energy. And one of those uses that we're excited to talk about is pollinators, bees, and even generating honey. So Allison, to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, how you got into this business.
Yeah, my name's Allison Wickham. I'm the founder of Siller Pollinatory Company. This company started in 2019, and it was kind of almost like a joke of an idea. I was actually brushing my teeth and thinking about how I hated my boss and I needed to do something different. And I'm in the middle of brushing my teeth, and I'm like, I wonder if I can get paid to keep bees, And so then I spit the toothpaste out and got to work starting a business where we are beekeepers for hire. So we are hired by landowners basically all over Central Virginia, and we sell them beehives, install their beehives, and manage and take care of their beehives for them.
Very nice. So tell us a little bit about your background before you got into the bees. What did you study? What drew you to this type of agriculture?
Yeah, so I'm a rural kid. I've always been a rural kid. I've always been an outdoor kid. Much to my parents were not outdoor folks. They were computer programmers, and so there's a very important nature versus nurture argument here, because I just popped out and was like, I need to go fishing, and I need to ride horses, and I need to go outside. So that's kind of been the kind of baseline of my whole life. I studied chemistry, environmental studies, and geography in my undergrad at JMU, go Dukes. And then I wanted to do something different. So I took a year off, went to Hawaii, because why not?
Sure.
And started working on a farm there. It was a tropical farm. We had coffee, macadamia nuts, lemons, limes, avocados, hydroponic greenhouse, and of course bees. So that was my first exposure to beekeeping. And, I said, what do you want me to do today? And they said, suit up. We're going to go look at the bees. And I've been beekeeping, that was 15 years ago. I've been beekeeping every day since that moment.
Wow.
So that's how I got started. And what was kind of a hobby and sort of a plan B turned into a plan A for me with the whole boss thing. And when COVID happened, basically, I kind of exited normal job life and started my own business. So yeah, that's how we got into beekeeping. I also studied at Colorado State University for crop and soil science. And, I worked in big dairy. I worked in corn and soybeans. I've done crop consulting, soil science consulting, and, nutrient management planning, resource management planning for large farmers. So I kind of have, livestock, land management, crop growing, beekeeping, sort of all these things come together with a scientific background for me. And this just seemed like it's just a perfect and natural fit.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you've got a pretty broad array of experience and knowledge in many different parts of the agricultural sector. But obviously, over the last couple of years, you've been spending a lot of time in the beekeeping space, developing your business. So before we talk a little bit about the site we're on and what your business is doing here, I want to just talk a little bit about what your business does in a little bit more detail. So you were talking a little bit about the different you mentioned earlier kind of bee keeping, contracting, et cetera. But tell me a little bit about the different buckets that your company, does as the Siller Pollinating Company.
Yeah, so like I said, it started off as a hive management service, beekeeping for hire. Landowners in Virginia hire us to take care of their bees. Naturally, as I'm talking to these landowners, the next question they ask is, what do I plant?
Right.
What do I plant for the bees? What do we do to make the bees' life better? Like, what can I do for these bees to make more honey and make everything go more smoothly? So I said, well, you need to plant this and this and this, and you could plant this if you want. And naturally, their next question was, great, can you do that for us?
Right.
So we bought the tractor, we bought a conservation no-till seeder, we started accumulating a little bit of equipment, and then we now have this other growing bucket of pollinator habitat installation, maintenance, management,
right.
Wildflower meadow planting for hire as well.
Yeah.
I'm also a partner in a meadery, Thistle Rock Mead Company. Mead, if you don't know, is honey wine. So I'm the beekeeper. I collect the
Yeah.
honey and I deliver the honey to Doug, who's the mead maker, and he turns that honey into an absolutely magical beverage.
Yeah.
So that's sort of another now big bucket
Sure.
of how I spend my time. And increasingly consulting with energy companies
Right.
because they need somebody local who has the knowledge of the plants and the land and the management techniques so that they can optimize their use of the site.
Right. So that's a great segue into kind of talking about what we're doing here. It sounds like, your business, you've got hands with landowners doing stuff on their land for them to develop honey on their property. You're working to produce honey for business. And I believe the meadery's in Charlottesville.
That's right.
And then you've got this newer part of the business working with energy companies. And we're on a solar site here in King William County. And your site, one of the first couple in the state to utilize this type of
Hmm.
agriculture. We'll talk a little bit about the word we'll use to describe it in a little bit. But tell me a little bit about this specific project, what you've got going here, and kind of the relationship that your product
Hmm.
has to the rest of the site.
Yeah, so this site, it's a couple hundred acres of under panel, and we have honeybees on the site. And we have also installed a 3.5 acre pollinator habitat in some of the open space, sort of the under or unutilized space, sort of in the corners of the property. And so, also under the panels, this particular operator has planted a lot of Dutch white clover and some grasses to really nicely revegetate this site, and the clover is providing a lot of nectar for the honeybees too. So this site is basically covered in flowers,
Right.
and flowers are the thing that bees need to make honey.
Right.
So the bees are foraging, grazing, if you will, on this
Sure.
site, and they're taking that nectar back to the hive
Right.
and they're turning it into honey. And so it's actually a really, really good symbiotic relationship
Sure.
to have the bees on these sites because here we have so much open land that we're revegetating with native flowers, nectar producing flowers. So we have a real opportunity here to sort of not only produce energy but to produce food
Right.
right here on the site.
Exactly. And another interesting part about this site specifically, and of course, different solar sites have different characteristics all across the state and across the country. But on this site in particular, the landowner is also utilizing nearby land for row crops. They also have a business that they run off of the land as well. Talk to me a little bit about, from your experience, the relationship that the bees that you're using on this site. What's the relationship to the other land surrounding it? What is that relationship? Obviously, out here, the bees are able to graze, but what's that relationship to those other crops around the area?
Yeah, so honeybees in particular, this isn't true of all pollinators, but in particular with honeybees, they have a huge foraging radius. So they will go 3 miles, sometimes up to
Wow.
five as the crow flies,
Wow.
which is it's a circle of approximately 18,000 acres.
Wow.
So not only are they grazing on this site, but they're providing an ecosystem service to the surrounding farmers, neighbors with vegetable gardens, any orchards that are nearby.
Right.
Every time the bee makes a visitation to the soybean flower, for instance, you've got better soybean yield.
Right.
So it's really important. Pollinators are not only important for everybody to optimize our food production where they're pollinating, but just moving these bees in here in particular has a positive net impact on the 3 mile
Right.
radius surrounding us.
Right. And you mentioned, in Central Virginia, I know we're kind of on the east side of the state now, but in Central Virginia, near your meadery, the wineries and the orchards that are producing apples for different cideries in the region obviously would benefit largely for increased pollinators in
Hmm.
the area. You talked a little bit earlier before our conversation today about in those periods of drought, it's important in those periods that we do have rain that we're making the best of our time and making sure the bees are pollinating and all of our crops are getting that equal kind of pollination. But it's important because in those times of drought, we see that the bees aren't as active, and so it's important that
Hmm.
we get opportunities like this to get the bees out rolling around and grazing or harvesting, so that the crops nearby within that 5 mile radius are being as bountiful and as plentiful as possible for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the vines of the grapes in Central Virginia, a lot of them are sort of self pollinating. So pollinators don't necessarily have a super direct impact on the
Sure.
vines. The orchards, however,
Right.
absolutely direct impact. the more pollination you have, the more apples you have. That
Right.
just is. And peaches, nectarines, and these types of things, plums. But even for the wineries, like a good, healthy, balanced ecosystem and food web of beneficial insects is only beneficial to
Right.
sort of the whole picture. As
Right.
we know, things can get really out of whack if you have like not enough of one thing or too much of another species. And so just having everything be more productive kind of equally
Right.
is beneficial to their whole system.
Yeah.
And I'll give you, a specific example that could be helpful to sort of indirectly to the grapevines is vineyards will also often plant like Dutch white
Yeah.
clover underneath their vines. And white clover is a legume.
Yeah.
So it's fixing nitrogen from the atmosphere and putting it into the soil.
Yeah.
And the bees love leguminous plants. And so the honeybees are visiting all of these white clovers. And every time they do, that white clover is making more seed.
Right.
And every time that white clover makes more seed, we've got more white clover. And the more white clover we have, the less nitrogen the vineyard has to use to meet the nitrogen needs of the vines.
Right.
So it's an example of how intricate the web is and how
Right.
connected everything is.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a great story to tell, and I really appreciate the conversation. We'll be back in just a moment to talk a little bit more about agrivoltaics and then how all of this is interconnected in our economy and in our lives from day to day. All right, welcome back. Excited to jump back into the conversation. So let's start with agrivoltaics and a newer term to our team and probably to a lot of our listeners, apivoltaics. Our listeners will probably be familiar with the term agrivoltaics, which generally represents an umbrella term for any kind of dual use agriculture on a solar site, doing some kind of additional production with the land while generating that energy from solar. But tell me a little bit about the term apivoltaics and what that means to you and your business.
Yeah. So apivoltaics is more sort of drilled down version of agrivoltaics, is very specifically talking about honey production on these sites.
Right,
And so what that means is we're bringing the honeybees onto the site and they are generating honey, which is food. They're generating food
right,
on the site along with the panel. So it is truly 100% an agricultural joint venture
right,
with the production of clean energy. And, that honey usually is injected into the local economy.
right,
And so that's food that is going from this local site with a local farmer.
right,
Because, even though I have kind of an interesting business model in terms of the way that I'm farming, these honeybees are livestock.
right,
And, according to the IRS, according to the USDA, and according to myself, I'm farming.
right.
And so we are actually farming this land and producing food on this land. And that food can be shared locally.
Right. And whether it be at a local farmer's market or at your meadery or somewhere else, this is like you say, food, an agricultural product that is being produced from livestock, similar to what we traditionally think of livestock: cows, sheep, goats, etc. And on that topic, an interesting thing, sometimes when we're talking about projects, we say they're going to do agrivoltaics, and they may do one thing: they may plant wildflowers, they may bring on bees, they may bring sheep out. And I think that may have led to a little bit of a misconception that you can't have a bunch of these things happening all at the same time. So, one question I have for you, and if you could dive a little deeper into it and kind of the relationship between the two pieces of agrivoltaics, but how can sheep grazing and beekeeping exist on the same solar facility?
Yeah, very easily. The honeybees have a very small footprint for the space that they need to take up within the site.
Right.
We have 10 hives over there in a space that's approximately 15 by 40
Okay.
feet.
Right.
So a very small,
Yeah.
very, very small footprint. And yet they have an enormous sphere of influence on the
Right.
site. They're going to graze the whole site and beyond. Their foraging radius, 18,000 acres.
Right.
It's this site and beyond.
Right.
The sheep can coexist very peacefully as long as we're not right up next to the hives.
Right.
They will have no issues. We're here away from the hives a little bit. The sheep would be here away from the hives a little bit. You just kind of have to exclude the sheep from the immediate vicinity around
Right.
the bees, and then everybody is coexisting safely and in harmony.
Right.
And the seed mixes that can be installed underneath the panels, we can put sort of sheep optimized mixes underneath these panels
Yeah.
and also be considerate to the bees. And then in the sort of open areas where it's not quite so critical that we keep the vegetation short,
Right.
we can put maybe some sort of different, more pollinator focused
Yeah.
mixes. And, you don't have to plant all the same thing all under everything. You can kind of, and you can pick and choose. You have the ability to make a custom mix.
Right.
So, a lot of people will say, well, the sheep can't graze the pollinator habitat. And that's just unequivocally false
Right.
because you can design if you know when you're designing a project that you want sheep and bees and pollinator habitat on the project, you can design your seed mix such that if there's a plant that's good for pollinators, but it's poisonous to sheep, maybe take it out,
Right.
and put the pollinator habitat that you put on the site, make sure that it's agreeable to sheep.
Right.
And, with very simple, cheap electric fencing, the grazer can basically exclude the sheep from the open areas except for once a year.
Right.
These pollinator habitats, they do need a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of management.
Yeah.
Usually it's once annual mowing.
Yeah.
But we can bring the sheep in to graze it once annually too, as long
Right.
as, the species are compatible. And
Right.
we've been intelligent in our species selection. The same is true for underneath the panels.
Right.
We can optimize this for the sheep, but we can put in some Dutch white clover. We can put in some black-eyed Susans. We can put in some low-growing species that
Right.
will benefit the bees and are not harmful to the sheep.
Right. And it's all about that balance. Even without any kind of agrivoltaics, it's still a conversation of how do we find a way to balance the land and protect the land and also generate energy. But when you're introducing these new factors, it takes a little bit of that front end work, a little bit more oomph on the front end. But once you've got that balance, it's great for everybody. You're able to generate a product revenue for different parts of that local economy and really emphasizing that, a lot of what we're doing here, sometimes we get tripped up and think that all we're doing here is producing energy, and that's a very important part of this land. And even on sites that aren't using agrivoltaics, the energy that producing, using that land for that energy conserves it, allows it for future use down the road. And so these projects, especially when incorporating agrivoltaics or apivoltaics, provide that necessary injection to a local economy, to a statewide economy, and potentially down the road, once we see a greater number of these projects, an injection into the national economy. You talked about it a little bit there, and maybe that was your answer to the misinformation a little bit. But tell me a little bit about, of course, in our work, when we're engaging in communities, we're really trying to knock down those walls of,
Mhm.
of myths and misinformation, things that just categorically aren't true, but stand in the way of good projects, good investments. And obviously those investments, those projects are opportunities for you, for solar grazers, for different farmers, et cetera. Tell me a little bit about, one piece of misinformation that you hear, and how you would address that if you were having a conversation in the field.
Yeah. So this is near and dear to my heart, and it's very easy for me to answer this question because I am a rural person. I'm a rural kid. I grew up in a rural community. I care about how land is used.
Right.
I care about what happens to land. I care about the way people treat land. I care about what we're growing. I care about what we're doing to the water, to the air. I care about that because, there's only so much.
Right.
Once it goes into houses, we're done.
Right.
That's it.
Can't come back.
It's not coming back. So, obviously population's growing. People need houses to live in. But, again, population is growing. Energy demand is growing. We
Right.
need to create energy. Everybody's on the same page with that.
Yeah.
We got to create energy. Everybody's on the same page with fossil fuels is not the way.
Sure.
So we got to figure out what we're going to do.
Fair enough.
And with, solar specifically and, maybe even to some extent wind or maybe even like, hydroelectric, what we have is an opportunity for dual use.
Right.
There is no opportunity for dual use
Right.
at a coal-fired power plant.
Yeah.
I'm not putting bees at a coal-fired power plant.
Right.
So we have a real opportunity here to keep the land in agricultural use, truly.
Right.
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm out here doing it. The grazers are out there doing it. Actively, there are sheep on sites in
Right.
Virginia and every other state in this nation. People are actively farming this land.
Thousands of acres. all over.
Thousands and thousands of acres. From one farmer to the next, it's real. It is happening. There's bees on the site. There's sheep on the site. There's flowers on the site. It looks maybe a little bit different than traditional agriculture, but here's the thing. I've worked in traditional, large-scale grain ag in my career.
Sure.
I know as well as anybody the margins that
Right.
these farmers are operating on. In fact, they're usually negative.
Right. Right.
Right? So we're running an entire country's food system
Yeah.
on a net negative operation.
Right.
And, let's say you have a 1,000-acre family farm. Well, if you put 200 acres of it under panel, you're going to supplement the ability to keep that family farm.
Right.
You
Exactly.
can farm 800 acres.
Yep.
We can have, clean energy generation going on the other 200 acres. And guess what? You can still farm that too.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you do corn and soybeans, do that on the 800, but get into sheep
Right.
and put the sheep on the 200.
Right.
Right. And so we have a real opportunity here that just doesn't exist in any other sector.
Right. Right.
And we can work together and we can farm the land, we can keep it agricultural, we can keep it away from development,
Right.
permanent development,
Right.
and everybody can have a better livelihood.
Right. And one thing that our team, we don't say this lightly. Of course, we say it in a light manner. But the reality is when you put houses out, although they're necessary, when you put them out on land like this, that is the final crop, like you say. That's the
That's it.
last thing. You can't bring it back. The reality is now we have the technology and we've innovated to a point where we're able to protect the topsoil. A farmer will tell you one of the hardest things to do is cultivate the soil and make it, possible to utilize.
Mhm.
And when you build a home, you've taken all of that investment away. But when you're doing something like this, when you're protecting the topsoil and investing in the ground, you protect it for future generations, which is
Mhm.
exactly what we're trying to do. And it's you talked about sheep, and of course you're doing bees, but we're also seeing innovations in cattle. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a future ahead of us that we need to keep pushing towards, and the only way we can do that is by supporting this type of project, this type of investment, and advocating for more dual use,
Yeah.
right? So for somebody who, like they're at a point in their career, maybe they're in agriculture, maybe they're still in school, but they recognize the opportunity of innovation, of clean energy, of new agriculture. What is one thing that maybe you wish you would have told yourself, or one piece of advice that you give to that young person who is looking to get into this industry in that point of that? What's that one piece of advice that you might give them?
Yeah, so, I didn't know this existed when I was in school. I had no idea.
Right.
Um, and, if you had asked me 10 years ago, what are you going to be doing? I would not have told you that I would be growing flowers and raising bees on solar sites.
Right.
But the opportunity is here. It's right in front of us. It's going ahead fast, and you got to seize that opportunity,
Right.
and you got to run with it, and the technology is going to improve. Everything's going to get better. I would not have flown in the first airplane.
Yeah.
So we have to, like you say, we have to invest in the technology. We have to trust in the infrastructure building and getting better all the time. We have to know that we're headed towards better conservation of the topsoil, better decommissioning plans,
Right.
right? So we're working towards this, and it's a work in progress.
Right.
And we need all the help we can get.
Sure.
We need all the advocates we can get. We need people like me out here advocating for pollinators, being a part of the plan.
Right.
And we also need people advocating for topsoil, advocating for, landowners and neighbors. I mean, we have to have people that are out here advocating for better, more efficient technology.
Right.
And we need people that are smart
Right.
to design it.
Yeah.
And so my advice is definitely to get involved. The opportunity is here. It's not going anywhere.
Mhm.
No matter what happens, this is the way forward. We're going
Right.
to keep going.
Yeah.
So one thing that the renewable energy space does really, really well is we get together and we talk.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of conferences, there's a lot of networks, there's a lot of groups online. I mean, the conferences that I've been to have been amazing.
Right.
You've got RE Plus, you've got Solar Farm Summit.
Yeah.
In here in Virginia, we have the Virginia Solar Summit. I mean, we have these really good meetings.
Right.
And lots of people come, not only because we all have a great time together,
Yeah. Yeah.
which we do, but lots of people come because we're not carefully guarding our industry secrets.
Right.
We are out here like, we designed this thing and it's better and y'all should adopt that too.
Right.
And I'm doing this on this site and it's working really well and y'all should do that too.
Right.
And so it's a really I don't know the word I'm looking for. It's a really collaborative
Right.
community, and that's kind of unique.
Right.
And it's not like any other industry I've ever been a part of.
Right.
And so I would say just like start showing up at these meetings.
Yeah.
Start shaking hands. Start learning. Get on LinkedIn. LinkedIn
Right.
is huge in the renewable energy space.
Yeah.
So get on LinkedIn and start communicating with people, and come to the conferences. Have a good time. And just try to figure out how you can jump in
Sure.
somewhere.
Right.
Because another thing about this industry is everything's always changing and
Right.
growing all the time. So
For sure.
people have really got an opportunity to sort of go from one thing to the next
Yeah.
and start somewhere, but end up exactly where you need to be.
Right, exactly. And that's, the conferences like you talk about, they even have discounts for students. It's really exciting, that collaborative nature of the renewable energy space with agriculture, with universities, institutions of higher learning, and that investment in the future generation that leads to more innovation. Allison, it was great chatting with you today, learning about your operation here on this solar site. We are very thankful for this conversation and appreciate you tuning in to the America First Energy podcast. And we look forward to being back with you soon. Well, Skyler, that was a great conversation that we had with Allison Wickham from the Siller Pollinator Company on the solar site out in King William County. It was great to hear about these new innovative techniques, hearing from someone who's on the ground doing the agriculture themselves. Fun fact to all our listeners as well, later that day after the interview, Allison was able to actually harvest over 300 pounds of honey, which she's able to sell, use in the local community, give to the landowner, or also use in another business that she participates in a local meadery in Charlotte. So it's really exciting to hear about agrivoltaics, a new term that we were introduced to as a part of that broader effort to encourage dual use among solar facilities. And we're excited to follow that conversation with another conversation with someone else in the agricultural space on a solar site in Prince Edward County, where Matt English will talk about his sheep grazing operation down there.
Yeah, Ben, I had the chance to join one of our favorite solar grazers, Mr. Matt English, in Pamplin, Virginia, inside of Prince Edward County, on a small farm, the Alt family farm. Got to meet Mr. Alt as well and hear about Matt's solar grazing practices, or agrivoltaics, as it's commonly referred to within the industry. Matt's not from too far away from this individual solar farm. He's been grazing it for the last year or so now. Really, really enjoys it. We're super excited to highlight his story on the Alt family farm in this solar farm in Prince Edward County. So looking forward to that conversation now.
All right, so Matt, where are we at in the lambing season? We got to see several baby lambs on the site. Are we in the middle of it? Are we finishing up lambing season?
We are finishing up on this track and getting ready to start on several bigger ones. So this is our smallest track, but we love it because we've got some first-time mothers here. We put them on a small track where we can keep a very close eye on them before we move them to bigger tracks anyway in the community. The hit ratio that we had with lambing season on solar is better than we've ever had on a family farm. I mean, we've never had so many twins and some triplets like we've had in the last couple of years being on solar. And all these right here, the growth rate on them is just unreal. I mean, we have to feed them wholly little grain. And like I said, we've gotten complaints on some we took straight from solar to the local butcher markets, and they said that they're too fat, Matt.
Too healthy.
And it's hard to believe that, but the protein that's here and the grass mixes that the solar company uses, and these guys, I never farmed with environmentalists. I mean, they have hired environmentalists that come out and test the soils and look at all the productivity of the grass, and then the sheep's producing organic fertilizer on top of that. And the sheep will out-eat a cow for its vegetation, different varieties and all. So it's weeds and things like that, that if it was cattle here anyway, that would be left, and that'd be more bush hogging and lawnmower use and things like that. And the sheep, they all eat it. So, and they get under the panels very well. And like I said, we've had zero safety issues with the sheep, and we're running hundreds of head in the multi-counties now.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that's one thing folks don't realize is that this represents a multi-million-dollar investment in our energy grid and in this local community. Of course, the company is going to make sure that these panels are producing as much energy day in and day out as possible. And if there are any issues, that they immediately address them and fix them. This is an investment. They got to protect that return.
True.
One thing we haven't really touched on is soil health. Matters to a lot of folks in Virginia, and what the soil health would look like underneath a solar farm over a long period of time. From your perspective, being on sites for a couple years now, how do you see soil health over the lifetime of one of these projects?
So, for example, yesterday I sent several neighbors that are very large farmers here in the communities and pictures of my grass in the solar field. And I said, you look at how my fields look and you look at yours.
Yeah.
And we're having a bad growing season this spring here in Virginia in this part because we're having cool weather and not much rain. And the grass is stunted for us, the hay that we use and then even the pastures. But we hadn't had that issue that much with the solar. And I drive these roads all the time and I look at other neighbors' pastures and other neighbors' fields, and I see a lot of erosion issues on a lot of these family farms. But here we have zero. I've been here during hurricanes on these tracks in the middle of them and all, checking fence and doing a welfare check on the animals. And we don't have the erosion issues that we have on family farm and my neighbors' family farms and other neighbors just right here in the community. I don't see that here.
Yeah. Matt, if you had to zoom out and look at your peers in the solar grazing industry in Virginia and the state as a whole, where do you see it going? Do you think you're going to hopefully pick up additional sites? Do you think that more folks are going to get into this game as more properties can consider solar and consider grazing to maintain that vegetative management? Where do you see the future going?
The future's bright in solar. I mean, we started out, like I said, a couple years ago, right up the road at the one close to the house there. And how we got on that one was we had a drought that year. And I was like any nosy neighbor, I'd rode down occasionally and looked at the solar farm because it was something new in the community. And I said, man, look at the amount of grass that's on that. And my dad was with me and he said, good God, son. He said, if we could put sheep on that, he said, we have it made. And I rode down there one day and I looked and it was a fleet of lawnmowers as far as you could see, mowing the prettiest grass that I have ever seen here in the county. And I called that company and I kept calling them and I finally got hooked up with the right person. And flash forward now, anyway, we're in 3 counties on 6 tracks. And I've turned down probably twice that much outside of the communities here.
Mhm.
Just logistically, I just can't handle it, the travel and all and everything. But if I wanted to be from the Shenandoah Valley down to the Chesapeake Bay, the opportunity's there.
Wow, that's incredible. That's great growth potential. And as folks learn more about this, what's one piece of wisdom that you would leave somebody with, whether it's somebody just interested in a given community that sees solar coming with proposals, somebody that's new to it and has never been on one of these sites. What would you say to them? What's one piece that you don't think's being brought into the conversation enough?
It's a lot of negativity, especially here in central Southside Virginia on the solar. One, it's new. And I use the example in the county where I'm from, just right across the road here in Appomattox, we proposed a Walmart there about 10, 12 years ago. And everybody said Walmart was going to shut down all the local businesses. And when I go in that Walmart, I see the people that said they were going to shut the local businesses down shopping at that Walmart. And in my county, I rode downtown the other day and I think almost every storefront has a business in it. And it looks like they're thriving. Same with solar. It's something new in a rural area. We as rural Virginians, we don't like change. We don't like nothing new. But once again, we have to adapt and overcome. These companies would not be trying to put panels out here in Virginia if it wasn't a need for the electricity. It's a need and it's a growth. And for example, you're sitting in the middle of where a coal plant used to be 1 hour that way. It's no longer in business. 1 hour this way, it's in temporary operational use, I think they call it, to where they only use it during peak season, really cold times when electricity is being needed or really hot. So we're in a need area for some type of electricity.
Yep. Well, Matt, thanks for joining us today. You're wise beyond your years, and I see your sheep coming to greet us here.
We'll have to go and get some good pictures of them there and all. We appreciate
Sure
you
will.
coming out. Love
Thanks,
having
man.
y'all on site.
Appreciate it, sir.
Well, welcome back to the America First Energy podcast. Skyler, that was a great interview with Matt English, and I was super happy to have conducted that interview with Allison, two great leaders here in Virginia, but also across the country. Allison, as a matter of fact, is being recognized nationally at the Solar Farm Summit in just a couple of weeks for her leadership in that space. But as we transition from those exciting conversations in the dual use space around solar, want to shift in the news section to a little bit more of an economics conversation, right? Recently in Virginia, there's been some news about the changing economics of the state, the position of the state in terms of national economic prominence. So going to toss it over to you to tell us a little bit about what's going on here in Virginia, particularly in Northern Virginia when it comes to economic growth and development.
Yeah, Ben, we want to highlight a specific article that came out from the Cardinal News titled "Northern Virginia is at a Critical Crossroad, which means rural Virginia is too." This was written by Mr. Dwayne Yancey of the Cardinal News, and I've known Dwayne for about a decade now and have closely followed his work. He's a really thoughtful guy. I'd encourage folks to check out Cardinal News to see some of his reporting and sign up for his weekly political wrap-ups that come out every Friday afternoon. But what Dwayne does here is he talks about some news that was made very recently in Northern Virginia, talking about the commercial real estate market and really how it's tanking in Northern Virginia as so many folks move towards remote work and you don't need those big, expensive office buildings. Noting that Fairfax County in particular is at a crossroads and is in a really difficult spot as a lot of their real estate value just goes away. Buildings being sold for pennies on the dollar from what they were sold at a number of years ago, and how that's really kind of restructuring what the northern economy relies on, those office buildings, those huge companies that call Northern Virginia home, and how that's going to have broader impacts across the state as the Northern Virginia powerhouse of the economy changes what the rest of the economy in Virginia looks like as well. In this article, he hits on just about everything, and we want to highlight it because so much of our Virginia economy, of course, is interconnected. He talks about housing, of course, that commercial real estate element, AI, energy policy, education policy, education funding, as well as local tax policy as well. So all of this comes to a head, and his thesis with this piece is that if Northern Virginia doesn't have its economic powerhouse in the commercial real estate space, and as we see folks moving away from Northern Virginia year after year, that's really going to change up how Virginia is funded. A huge percentage of Virginia's state income, state tax revenue comes from Northern Virginia, and as that changes, the rest of the state's going to have a comparatively higher burden to help fund the state's economy, to help fund the state government. He tied this into a really interesting example down in your neck of the woods, Ben, with Scott County. You want to walk us through that?
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned it's a significant portion of the general fund. It's 42%. I mean, we're almost talking half of the general fund. That pot of money that is sent out for roads, for schools, infrastructure all across the state. But like you said, in Scott County, Dwayne mentions a specific example. The schools down in Scott County receive about 66% or 2/3 of their funding from the state. And about half of that funding directly is attributed to revenues generated from Northern Virginia. And the point that is made by Dwayne, which I think is pretty central to a lot of the conversations we're having, whether it be with AI infrastructure or energy infrastructure or even roads and bridges, it's the idea that different parts of the state are heavily reliant on one another for different parts of our economy, our daily lives, right? The energy, a lot of times we hear that's produced across the state, for a long time was produced or generated from coal mined from Western Virginia and in Southwest Virginia, and brought not only across the state, but to different parts of the world. And now we're in a modern era where other parts of the state are supporting AI infrastructure in Northern Virginia, in Southern Virginia, Central Virginia, and we're growing out that energy infrastructure in different parts of the state. And that relationship is a little bit more clear to communities, but the relationship between our funding and our schools or our road updates is a little less clear. And Dwayne makes it pretty apparent that without a a buzzing economy, a sustainable workforce in Northern Virginia, Southwest Virginia and Southern Virginia schools, roads, local governments are going to have to make new decisions about how do we meet the burden of supporting these schools when that money's not coming from Northern Virginia. And what does that mean? That means potentially raising taxes. That means potentially looking for new economic opportunities to invest in a community to generate that lost tax revenue for your locality. And that's why this is not just a question about Northern Virginia, right? It's a question of what can these localities across Southern and Southwest Virginia be doing to attract that tax revenue, attract that investment to potentially become more self-sufficient and generate more of that revenue at home.
Yeah, Scott County example that he cited was that 2/3 of the school funding in Scott County comes from Richmond or comes from the state government, and half of that 2/3 equation comes specifically from Northern Virginia. So that's an 8-9 hour drive, but that is a way that Scott County is relying on counties that are comparatively wealthier up in Northern Virginia or the rest of the state to help reach that funding imbalance, that funding deficit there. And if that disappears, it's going to be up to the rest of the state to help make up that delta. It's really important just to realize how all these things go together. The Governor Youngkin is up in Northern Virginia this week touting AI's boom and what Virginia can do to attract more folks to that Northern Virginia area to enter into some of these AI jobs or take control of some of these AI tools to help them be more marketable in the job market. One important thing to realize there is that if we're going to be competitive in the AI market as a country or as a state, we have to have more of that computing power, more of those data centers to make that a reality. If we're going to have data centers, we absolutely need the energy to power these data centers. And that's something that, we're not really doing right now. We're importing 40% of the electrons that we're using to power homes, businesses, and yes, data centers in Virginia. We're relying on our neighboring states to do that. We don't have a very secure energy portfolio right now. The answer there is saying yes to an all of the above energy strategy, permitting more energy projects so the cost of energy comes down so that we have energy surpluses one day in the future in Virginia. We're looking at all these ways to creatively grow the economy. And I know Governor Youngkin and the administration was disappointed last week to see CNBC downgrade Virginia from the #1 state for business all the way down to #4. We're not doing as hot as we were a year ago, and there's a number of different factors there, but we're being beat by states like Texas, North Carolina, Florida, who are all above us in the CNBC rankings now. Those states all have a lot more solar energy on the grid than Virginia does. I'm not saying that to mention causation, but I think correlation is absolutely true. Those states have more stable, more abundant energy supplies than we do in Virginia. If we're going to grow via the AI boom, as Governor Youngkin I think wants us to ride as best we can, we have to have more energy. It matters not just for the local taxes that these energy projects pay. It matters for that school funding scenario. It matters for housing, keeping taxes low for families, keeping taxes low for businesses as well, to deliver that high quality education that folks want to see no matter where they live.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's important to note while we're talking about this that bringing a lot of communities will think, well, how can we supplement our budget? And one way that counties think about this is increasing the amount of inflow you have. How many people are bringing to the county to live there, which is very central to, of course, supporting different parts of the community. It's great to encourage new jobs, new industries in that way. But at the same time, the downside of encouraging a large inflow is that you put more strain on your streets. You put more strain on the local police and fire. You put more strain on your public schools. And while you're in this weird dilemma where maybe public funding and that investment from Richmond is decreasing. So what is one way that we can invest in our communities while also ensuring that we're not adding additional strain in that investment? And one way to do that is by citing responsible, renewable, or just energy in general. These projects are investing tax revenue without increasing the number of children in the county that need a second grade teacher. This isn't increasing the amount of buses that have to run on the streets. Of course, this is a way for counties to respond to not only the energy need, but also to that financial need that's increasing in our counties. And, it's important to note, too, that across Virginia and across the country, housing costs are going up. And the reality with that is as costs of homes go up and tax rates go up to supplement local budgets, you're paying more in taxes, even more than you would if your home was the same price as it was 2 years ago, but the tax rate goes up, right? And so localities are in this weird balance of how do we ensure that we have enough to supplement the services that are central to our community, while also ensuring that we are supporting our homeowners and supporting our landowners. And one way to do that is looking for innovative ways to utilize the land. And maybe that's a data center in some communities. Maybe that is renewable energy in others. Maybe it's natural gas, right? It's how do we balance these things? And we're seeing communities like Scott County, we talked about them a little bit earlier, we're seeing communities like Scott County think with a forward-thinking mind. They have this year been critically important to Southwest Virginia's new energy portfolio, citing roughly about 6 solar projects in the region, which over the next couple of years, once those projects get built out, and if they qualify to be a part of the community solar program in Virginia, they'll be able to invest that kind of net positive tax revenue while also bringing in local residents to participate in that solar and save money on their energy bill. And it's that type of innovative thinking that we need to see more of, that we're unfortunately falling behind in here in Virginia, and that's maybe putting us a little bit lower in the rankings with CNBC. But it's that innovative thinking that we need to see more of to ensure that we can address this changing economic environment regardless of what happens in Northern Virginia.
Yep. Thanks, Ben. And again, kudos to Dwayne Yancey. He really gets it. All these things are interconnected, and his piece challenged us to think about just how interconnected Northern Virginia is to far southwest. We'll be sure to link to this Cardinal News piece in our show notes. And he understands that energy underpins so much. Housing, commercial real estate, AI, education, tax policy. Energy is the bedrock of so much of our economy, and it was great to see this so succinctly put into a piece out of Cardinal News. Ben, great episode today. Thanks again for your help with the King William Apiary Tour, and looking forward to the next one soon.
All right. Thanks, Skyler. Thank you for joining us for the America First Energy Podcast, brought to you by Energy Right. You can find our show on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. You can find full videos to accompany our episodes on the Energy Right YouTube page. Today's episode was hosted by Skyler Zunk and myself, Ben Wilson, produced by Caleb Ventura, with audio and visual support from Dylan Taylor. A big thank you to our guests, Allison Wickham from the Siller Pollinatory Company, and Matt English, a solar grazer with EZ Energy Solutions, for sharing their work with us. Join us next time for the America First Energy Podcast.